Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin this afternoon's Al-Liqa Al Jamaie with the national anthem Negaraku, together with the flag-raising ceremony led by Tuan Syahrul Arifin Maskuri, the Director of the Office of Security Management. All, please rise.
Baris! Baris! Tenang! Three! Baris! Baris! Diam! Dari three! Cepat! Jalan! Baris! Stay! Ke kanan! Dari kiri! Cepat!
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the world, and blessings be on our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, and his companions. Honorable Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Rector of the International Islamic University Malaysia, respected University Management Committee, Honorable Deans, Directors, Mahala Principals, Senior Officials, and staff of IIUM. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. In order to invoke the blessing of the Almighty, please allow me to start the program by inviting Ustaz Edros Mustaqim, Senior Religious Assistant Office of Sultan Haji Ahmad Shah Mosque, to recite Surah Al-Baqarah verse 249. Fayatafadal mashkura.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فلما فصل طالوت بالجنود قال إن الله مبتليكم بنهر فمن شرب منه فليس مني ومن لم يطعمه فإنه مني إلا من اغترف غرفة بيده فشربوا منه إلا قليلا منهم فلما جاوزه هو والذين آمنوا معه قالوا لا طاقة لنا اليوم بجالوت وجنوده قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو الله كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين صدق الله العظيم.
Thank you, Ustaz. I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone, and I'm sure everyone is excited to join our third Al-Liqa Al Jamaie and the launching of IIUM 64th Merdeka Month celebration. We are grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for it is with His blessings and mercy that we are able to be here today. Distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, now without further ado, I would like to respectfully invite Honorable Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Rector of IIUM, to deliver his speech.
Thank you, Sister Ani. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu asyrafil anbiya Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Dear Deputy Rectors, respected members of the University Management Committee, deans, directors, principals, fellows, IIUM committee members, brothers and sisters. Let me first of all thank Allah SWT for giving this opportunity, a very unique opportunity for us to meet to celebrate the independence, the 64th independence of Malaysia, and at the same time also launch the third Al-Liqa Al Jamaie, which is my third attempt to reach the university as far as the state of the university is concerned. I remember some 2 years ago when I had my first Al-Liqa on the 27th of August, I think. We were then at a crossroad also. The government was just elected, and here today, I think we are still in the same sort of situation. We've just got a government being elected about 2 days ago. Nevertheless, I think the pursuance of this university to move ahead, to get into a steady state in trying to build a university and at the same time the nation is something that we will do in our attempts to move forward. So for today, I think Alhamdulillah, we have just raised the flag to mark the 64th independence of this country. And together with our international students, we would ask them to join us in celebration of this very unique opportunity that we are an independent nation and therefore need to behave like one in trying to make do as far as the population and also humanity is concerned. So I would like to take you through a little bit of what I think is important for us to be reminded of this event and how do we gel this with what the university is trying to move forward, given the 64th independence celebration as well. Now, this is the flag raising ceremony, but this time around, I think unlike 2 or 3 years ago, we have got an unwelcome visitor. They were there at one point, but I think we were not very much impressed by it in their presence and significance. But now, by now, I think we not only have COVID-19, we also have their own variants, the Alpha, the Beta, and now also the Theta, the Delta sort of variants. I think this is a new dimension that I want to bring forward. What does this Delta variant mean to us in the context of coronavirus generally as a pandemic, and how do you deal with this as you move forward with the university's program as such? Now, what is different from the other dimension of COVID-19, we've suddenly found that this Delta variant is a response to the vaccines that were given to thousands or the millions around the world. And like all living organisms, they will try to respond and make sure they have minimally impact by anything of the substance that try to demise them at the same time. And we have got this Delta variants, which apparently is easier to transmit and easier to catch, despite the face masks and the thing, they are now in the air apparently. And if you are not cautious enough, you can be getting this variant at the same time. The symptoms are more serious and more severe, and it can cause a lot more hospitalization. And I think this is well demonstrated in many of the other countries, particularly in the north. The UK, I think, has got about 30,000 or 39,000 to be exact. America is about 3,000, and the rest are about a range of 1,000 or so. In our country, I think there's less than 100 at the moment in time, but there's no telling what will happen, as you can see, for what has happened from the coronavirus. From a small number right now we have passed the 20,000 marks as far as the COVID cases is concerned. The other 2 points that I think we need to also be mindful of, the time of exposure to the time of symptoms appearing is very, very short. And sometimes you are not able to react given this shorter period of time, and it will stick for a longer period and becomes longer in terms of its contagious time. And this is the one that caused the spread of this Delta virus very, very quickly. There's a new dimension, as it were. If you are so used to the old slow moving COVID-19 relatively, this is not the case. And therefore, moving around, wearing masks and taking all precaution needs to be done in a very serious way if we were to avoid the Delta variants as well. So this, I think, is a mark of difference as far as this is concerned. And as you can see, that particular map there, the United States, UK is probably the leading one, about 40,000 cases. The rest will be the more developed countries of the North America, Germany. I think Portugal now is also in the lead. And from the developing countries, you have India, right? Malaysia is still in the blue range, which is about 10 to 50. But like I say, there's no telling what will happen until and unless we are very, very vigilant about it. Yeah, we know of the Alpha, we know of the Beta. There's also a Theta one. The Delta one is causing a lot of problem, and in fact, people are beginning to speculate others, Lambda, and so on and so forth. So the whole issue gets very complicated, and as I've mentioned, the numbers are there. Yeah, you find UK, which is now 38,000, is a figure in July 2021. US, Portugal, Germany, and the rest are the developing countries like India, South Africa, Indonesia, and Uganda, and so on and so forth. So this will be the new warning. Yeah, if you are not careful, we may be caught in this kind of a race. And as far as we can see, there is no vaccine for it. People are talking about the third booster to contain Delta variant, but it is still on trial. We do not know whether the third booster will do what it is expected to do. But what is clear, at least there is one expert that talks about the whole idea of herd immunity is now not in the race anymore, because although we may vaccinate about 80% of the population, but we do not know what Delta variants will do. So the whole idea of seeking for herd immunity is not a priority in this particular case until and unless we can deal with the various variants, and Delta variant is one at the moment in time, right? Now, we are also concerned as people talk about coronavirus 19, and most of them do not give enough emphasis of the new variants that come in. Yeah, and this cartoon, I think, gives us a very nice picture. Give me a plate of anti-vax. These are people who are not convinced that vaccines will do the work, and some people who are still hesitant, and the Delta variants are telling us unless there is vaccines, you will not be able to control this at all. Because indeed, many of the people who get the Delta variants are people who are not vaccinated, including young children. Yeah. So far, we understand that young children are spared, but the people about 18 years and below, now we are beginning to see cases of many more young children being affected by the Delta variant. So it is an open book. People who are not vaccinated, whether they are elderly or otherwise, and including younger children, will be exposed to these Delta variants. And as you know, when children are exposed to this kind of infection, it is really difficult to contain because they themselves are not sure what's going on, right? So it is, to me, a kind of a situation where we cannot do much until and unless we adjust to it. Yeah. So this saying, I think, is a good saying. We cannot direct the wind. We don't know where this variant is coming from and how this pandemic will turn out. But all we can do is to adjust to the environments that is coming around. And therefore, we need to be very, very clear of what's happening on the ground. We must have our ears on the ground. We must know exactly what are the options that we've got. And in this context, I think I want to use the flagship as a kind of an example that will help us to turn around given the circumstances or the uncertainty that we have. Yeah? This uncertainty is the one that is causing us a lot of trouble, but until and unless we have options ready, we will not be able to act fast enough as far as dealing with the pandemic, particularly the Delta variant is concerned. Now, there will be winds blowing, yeah, and these winds are very, very nasty, of course, but until we are well rooted, you probably will disappear in the winds. And this is an example of that man there. Those two ladies seem to be well anchored, but this man here suddenly disappeared because they are not well anchored in the values that we are trying to arrive at as far as dealing with the uncertainty is concerned. So that is a fair warning. I think we need to be very well anchored in what we do, understand it well, and to make sure that it is well practiced as a habit or has a kind of a culture within our context where we are trying to live with the variants and also this COVID-19 at the same time. Now, where are we now when we talk about this wind blowing and how do we need to adjust? Yeah? My particular condition today, when we look at the status quo, as far as education is concerned, the unchanging wind that has been blowing for a long time that we have never adjusted. Yeah, we seem to be contented with it in the context of, first of all, education is about just the logic of economics. As long as it brings economics being, we are quite happy. And therefore, we talk about the many things that we talk that all becomes economic centric, right? If there is no argument at one point, but now we are beginning to question where is the wisdom in trying to arrive at this logic, right? We have lost the wisdom. We've just go directly into what the economic benefits are, and we do not know whether these are the actual benefit or the wiser thing to do as we move forward. Yeah, we've forgotten about the human person. We are beginning to talk about the human capital. In other words, the whole well-being of the human person do not matter anymore as long as their bank accounts are good. Yeah, I've got a friend who works in one of the rich oil state, and he wasn't too happy. He says, "Zul, if I'm not happy, I just open my bank book and I see the numbers and I'm happy again." This is a human capital sort of dimension. You know, if that's what happiness is all about, I think most of us will probably be out of job very soon because our bank book is not that luxurious as my friend in this rich oil state are working today, right? Again, therefore, the definition of well-being is again about finances, very close to the economics and not the social well-being. The social well-being now is beginning to be hyped up by COVID-19. When we talk about mental health and the rest of it, I think we are quite familiar with those. Yeah. So we lose this culture of humility. We think we can direct the wind, kind of arrogance that we say. We think we can turn around and make the wind work for us. And I don't think this is the case. And this can be manifested in a kind of collapse of the ecosystem, and then everything else becomes unsustainable. And to manage all this becomes a very difficult sort of task to move ahead, especially for a university of our size and stature as well, right? So we need to begin to recognize that tomorrow the wind will change, and in fact the wind is already changing, and we must now start to adjust our sail. So for the last 2 years, we are trying to adjust our sails slowly, knowing which direction that the wind is coming from. And this is what we have been doing for the last 2 years. And alhamdulillah, to a certain extent, is giving us some sort of impact. And what we need to do is basically to start looking at what is necessary given the previous experience. In other words, to bring back where the wisdom was. Okay? To understand back education, not only about livelihood, but it's about life at the same time. And I think the question of life is greater than the question of livelihood. Yeah? I like the statement that the DG was saying here. What's happening today is not because it is safe, but it's because of economics. So you sacrifice safety because of economics, but you will pay the price at one point because you have sort of neglected the very importance of safety in the context of human life. Yeah? We need human capital is important, but we also need to have the human person first before we build in the capital. In other words, be the person first, and then the capital will be able to manage itself, right? Finance well-being is important, but social well-being as it is now is even more important. You can have all the money there is, but if you are not socially well adjusted, then I think the money will go to pay for the socially unadjusted life that we're so used to. So we need to come back to humility. How to be humble. In other words, we do not have all the answers. We can only have the answers if we work together. If you're happy, if you are humble enough to admit that you don't know the answers, and therefore you start to search and ask other people, not to think that you have got the answers. Particularly in the context of politicians, they think they have all the answers, and then we have to pay the price because of their quote-unquote political arrogance in that sense. And therefore, we then can hope, inshallah, to bring up an ecosystem that is sustainable. Sustainable to me will be a just ecosystem, a fair ecosystem, an equitable ecosystem, a ecosystem that speaks for all. Yeah, if not the most, if not most of us, if not all of us. Yeah, that no one is left behind. It's not just a slogan, but it's something that we can actually demonstrate and make it happen within our period of time that we are trying to work on this. Yeah. So what happens, therefore, we need to look at what sort of knowledge systems are we looking at. I think it is very clear to me with the COVID environment, given the thing that's happening in the United States in the context of all life matters or Black Lives Matters, the knowledge that we have got are not a complete kind of knowledge. It is a knowledge that is truncated by colonization. We are given this knowledge that is actually not complete. And this is where I think this university has a role to play when we talk about the integration of knowledge. You want to decolonize the knowledge, get back to the very roots of knowledge, to desecularize it, or some people want to use the word Islamization. Yeah. All these, I think, needs to be thought of to bring back the very fundamental of education on wisdom, on the human person, the social well-being, the culture of humility, and finally, the sustainable ecosystem that will finally support what education is all about in the 21st century and beyond. It is not about the dollar sign, which is important, I'm not going to neglect it, but what is the purpose of the dollar sign? The higher purpose of the dollar sign becomes an issue to us. And this now, whether we like it or not, is being constantly reminded to us by this COVID environment and its variants. Yeah? Until and unless we are able to maintain this, flatten the curve as it were, then I think we are not adjusting our sails to where we are supposed to move in the direction where the wind is blowing, moving ahead, right? So this will be the kind of fundamental that I will look at when we want to talk about change. What are the changes that we want to grasp on? And these are some of the issues which is not new to us when we talk about South, when we talk about the futures, and indeed when we talk about our roadmap for the year 21 to 2022, and in fact beyond that, right? What is next is a question that needs to be asked. So we need to have a kind of an understanding of where the future will take us. At the moment in time, UNESCO is talking about the year 2030. We have got our own scenario of 2040, and I think UNESCO is working another platform of what happened with 2050, and certainly some of our brothers are working on the vision of 2077. All these are very important continuum that will connect the dots as we move on in trying to bring back the true understanding of knowledge and also the wisdom that is attached to it, so that we can answer what is next and be prepared for the things that is going to come, right? Now, I want to talk about this decolonization because I think this becomes now a global sort of discussion. Yeah, I will tell you the extent of it. Formally, we have got this whole idea of everything else is being framed of us from the colonial standpoint. And this morning, we just had a very wonderful debate on how do you fill in, how do you fulfill this mission of an independent nation? Are we truly independent? Of course, the colonial masters are not there, but some of the colonial masters are still infesting in our head, in our minds, the kind of thinking that we've got. We are not, quote unquote, truly independent because we still need their, quote unquote, recognition. Before IIUM become a world-class university, somebody in the North must tell us that we are world-class. We are not able to do this ourselves. And that dependency, to me, is very much part of colonialism that needs to be destructed as we move along. Yeah? So it happens in many countries. This is one of the examples that I can give you, particularly in Africa, South Africa. They talk about the decolonization of the legal system. In South Africa, in the aftermath of fees must fall. The people, the blacks particularly, are not able to afford education. And they are working on how to reduce education, and they have got a tagline, fee must fall, and to them, this is part and parcel of decolonizing the system so that more people can get useful education and knowledge from their own university based on their own civilization, own values, and own culture, right? And I wish the ICOL will also think along the same line. how do you decolonize their legal education in the context of maybe COVID-19? I'm not too sure. That there must be a kind of an effort to move forward to make sure that the education system is not plagued with other values that does not belong to us. Right? In Latin America, this has been a writing of decolonizing Western education, intervention in the philosophy of education from within and without. This is another authoritative book that represents the view of Latin America, which is part and parcel of the colonized West coming on, particularly North America, onto them. They want also to do this. We have got our own version. This is just before I left USM in 2011. We organized a Decolonizing University, the quest for non-Eurocentric paradigm. And as I landed in IIUM, I think this mission is still very important. And there's a nice caption there that talks about, the Western civilization is a mythical, a contrast, an ideology, a conceit that is actually not intellectually valid. It's written by one of the celebrated, historian called Norman Davies, that questioned the very substance or the very essence of Western civilization, as it were, right? We have got now, very recently, I think even the School of Oriental and African Studies, which is part of the University in London, are talking about also how do you decolonize. In an Oriental and African Studies, why there are so many whites teaching? Why there's not enough colored, not enough Africans teaching? Why are they not being enrolled in that kind of environment that talks about the true nature of education as far as Oriental and African Studies is concerned? And the pinnacle of all this is when Oxford itself being questioned that why is Cecil Rhodes still standing in one of the colleges? Cecil Rhodes, as you know, is one of the racists that brought down Rhodesia. He's a racist, and his statue is still there in Oxford, and they are now wanting that this statue being taken down and to decolonize education, even at the level of Oxford. So you can see elitist education is now being questioned. It doesn't matter where we are, and of course, in places like United States, people are questioning Yale. Yale is the name of a slave trader, right? And it is one of the celebrated university. How can a university be celebrated when it is named after a slave trader, when systemic racism is built into that university? So these are all part and parcel of the global discussion. When we talk about decolonization, when we talk about, bringing back what is fundamentally ours in the context of education, and I hope IIUM will be part and parcel of this. These are very general questions, but some people are asking very specific questions. A friend of mine, Professor Raju, who is a mathematician and also a philosopher at the same time, I brought him to USM, and this is the first question he asked the mathematicians when he started lecture. Why do you do calculus with limits? I'm sure all of us remember calculus, dx, dy kind of a thing. I forgot what is all this. And nobody can give an answer. I don't know whether our mathematician will have an answer. And when there's no answer, then he asked this professor, are you teaching science or are you teaching superstition? If you're teaching science, you must be able to give me an answer. If you're teaching superstition, that's okay, I will excuse you. And that mathematics is one of the very scientific things that we claim. You can almost tell it to the very, to the very detail of what it's all about. And yet we do not have an answer. Why do we need to do calculus with limits? So my question is this part of Islamization or decolonization or both or none of the above? Do we know why do we do this, or do we do this just because it is done before and we do not have an answer for it? These are very fundamental questions that we need to begin to ask in trying to redefine what education and where the future takes you, right? Beyond that, now we don't see the armies anymore. You don't see the white men anymore. I'm not saying that the white men are all bad. Some of them are very much enlightened, answering some of the issues that we've got. We are beginning to see decolonization in very different forms, and this is what we call the soft power. And some people list at least 6: the enterprises, education. I highlighted education because that's basically fundamental what our business is. Through culture, through diplomacy, and certainly through government sort of policies and so on and so forth. Yeah, sometimes they come into this being without us being aware of it because they are well disguised in any of these 6 things, right? So we begin to see now, how these are, if I can correlate it with the question of behavior, the question of resources, and the question of policy. Before there's soft power, there's hard power. Hard power is about, doing things in a very brutal way, in a very physical way, either by coercion, either by force, or either by sanction, and so on and so forth. That is not possible anymore. We don't expect people will come with a truckload of army and forces to teach philosophy or whatever it is. That will not happen. But it will happen in a very subtle way. Yeah, the attraction that we've gone through all this fancy stuff that we've got. It is called curriculum, it is called pedagogy, it is called whatever it is, a very well disguised slogan that we take it on board, thinking that it's a neutral kind of thing. It is not, right? Your enterprise could be a station for people providing ideas on what colonization is all about. Yeah, education is certainly one of the. We should elaborate a little bit more. Culture is certainly. Yesterday, I was out somewhere and I saw this young girl with the torn jeans. Yeah, and the one that's on the thigh, she has got something underneath it, but the one on the knees has got nothing around it. So I was wondering why is she so passionate about this torn jeans? For the poor, they want a nice jeans. For the rich, they want a torn jeans. I think this world has gone upside down. The poor will be happy to have a torn jeans, but they don't want it. They want a proper jeans. But the rich, they prefer to have a torn jeans for one reason. Apparently, the value has increased because this seems to give, quote unquote, a kind of resemblance of a sacrifice in the context of the northern culture. Yeah, diplomacy is certainly one of them, and all these things. So we need to be aware. We need to be mindful that this colonized sort of effort will come in very different dimension. And I would want to pick one. This is for Prof. Norbit in particular. Prof. Norbit knows I've been having on this. When we talk about artificial intelligence, which context of culture are we talking about? Who are the one who is writing the algorithm? From which culture did they come from? Yeah, these are two nice papers that talks about cross-cultural perspective and societal impact. It's not just technical impact. Now people are talking about technology as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. He is talking about societal impact, and some of the writings here are really very telling. Yeah, they kata sini to evaluate artificial intelligence and its potential in the context of a changed global variables. Right? How do you do this? And these are issues that worries me because now we seem to be taking all this AI as though it is given. Yeah, the masalah is sitting on there, but we don't see it. The masalah is sitting on there in the kind of values that they put into this. Right, and if you think this is a kind of impossible, you can see this artificial now in education. You can see this artificial intelligence now in our culture. It could be part of diplomacy. Certainly, it's part of enterprises. Yeah, it depends on who wrote, what sort of value is put in, and for what purpose. Right, and it is not a coincidence anymore because you can see, people are thinking of AI as a threat to democracy. In other words, people are monopolizing thoughts. Thoughts are not being discussed anymore because you're given a specific way of thinking in the form of this algorithm. Your handphone is probably a good example. Yeah, when it's structured that way, there's no way else that you can think unless you can deconstruct it, and most of us are not able to do that. Right? These are all the headlines that we have seen for the last number of years. Yeah. AI experts call for an end to the UK use of racially biased algorithms. I'm surprised to see this. Algorithm is racially biased. So if it's written against Asian, then forever, like I say, we will suffer from this kind of algorithm. Yeah? AI bias could put women's life at risk a challenge for the regulators. Yeah, see this gender bias, gender conflict is there. Yeah, gender bias in the eye, building a fairer algorithm, and so on and so forth. But the last part is there. Millions of blacks affected by racial bias in healthcare algorithm. Yeah, and apparently this is what we call the white algorithm. White algorithm, Norbert, if I am not mistaken, you are given a choice between black and white, and suddenly everything now is directed to the white, nothing to do with the black. And the algorithm is written in such a way, it is biased for that certain population. White and black is just a number, yeah, it's just a name. It could Malay between Chinese and Indian, or whatever. It depends on how you designed it. And now people are talking also about the ethical bias. Ethical is the kind of values that we have. So all this, I think, has put us into a mental state where the education will proceed the way it should proceed in a very unbiased environment with technology. We're supposed to be neutral, but certainly this is not the case. Yeah. So when we talk about AI, you also need to talk about big data, right? Big data is said to will transform our life, our work, and our thinking, right? And big data in education is something that we cannot avoid, because education is about accumulation of data, the research, and so on and so forth. But yet you see the same word, the word bias. You can see invisible woman, data bias in a world designed by men, right? And data discrimination, the dark side of big data. I think in Malaysia, when we talk about technology, we seldom talk about the dark side. We always want to talk about the bright side, and suddenly we are faced with the dark side and we do not know what to do. And one of the quote that I think is very important for us to think about, dia kata, as a word of caution, we should understand that big data may not necessarily lead to big shift. The global finance crisis clearly highlighted what can happen when rich data and analytics collided with gaps and lapse in judgment. I put the word value, another the kind of value that they've got. Yeah, lacking this good judgment, which is the value, big data can lead to bad decision and literally big disasters. All these are big stuff. Huh? So when we are hit by all these big disasters, then we do not know how to respond to it, because we are never prepared. You always look on the brighter side. So I am seen perhaps to be a very pessimistic, because I want to know what is the downside. Being trained as a pharmacist, we always look at the downside first before we go into the brighter side. Because once the downside is up, until and unless you know how to put it back, then there's no good as far as medicine is concerned, including your vaccines that you have today. So my issue is basically when you talk about Merdeka, when you think we are all now decolonized, it is far from it. They come in different forms, very subtle form, and that subtlety is something that we are now waking up to, given all these fundamental things. These are some of the questions which I will not bother you with, but I want to go into the issues that we've got now. All the data, the AI, these are all invisible enemies, all right? But invisible in the sense that most of us do not know who or what we are dealing with. Yeah? But the classical point is these invisible enemies called the COVID-19, and the word VUCA will probably also be volatile, uncertain. The C could be corona, the C could be chaotic, the C could be complex, yeah? And A is, of course, ambiguous, and so on and so forth, right? Now, what this tells us, and I think this is a lesson for everybody, especially our university, this cannot be handled singly. I think we have broken this this myth that you can do things singly. You can do it singly, that this makcik, she will go on hitting this animal here until cow come home. Finally, she'll get the COVID and she will die. That's for sure, right? So if you want to die quickly, go and fight this COVID alone, right? Otherwise, you need to work with other people. That's the first lesson. So breaking down the silos, working together is something that we need to work together, whether we like it or not. You may not like your neighbor, but for the sake of COVID, you may need to like him or her for that purpose. In other words, we are talking about social solidarity, which is now lacking as far as the community is concerned. We don't have the solidarity that we need. That's why the numbers are going up and up until and unless we can work together, right? Apart from that, we need to be very practical. In this case, keeping good hygiene. In other words, work on it. It's not just having solidarity, but not working on it. A good example, we talk about hygiene, is to use whatever you've got. I think all of us know, yeah, what needs to be worked at. The mask is important. The hands need to be clean. Don't touch your orifices, your eyes, your nose, your lips, and your ears, or whatever. Yeah, when you cough, make sure that it doesn't flare into the open. Keep your distance, not your social distance, but physical distance. And certainly, I think the last one is about having good sleep. I think we have no problem with a good sleep, but the rest, I think we have got problems. Yeah, everybody seems to be sleeping alone now in this particular context. But that is not all. Earlier, we understand it's about the only thing, but now we have got other issues to play. It's not just the hand that needs to be kept clean, it's also the heart and the mind. And this is, I think, where the invisible enemies is in my context, because we talk about mental health. Suddenly, mental health becomes a new pandemic. You have your hand clean, but if your heart is not clean and your mind is cluttered, I think you will still get the COVID-19 in the different form, right? So these are basically coming back to the fundamentals that I talked to you earlier about the whole person, not just the capital, but the whole person. How do you bring the whole person to bear when we talk about an invisible enemy like the coronavirus? Yeah. Finally, we talk about lockdown as an alternative if nothing else works. And the lockdown is basically a recognition that we need to actively work on a common value, right? So that everybody is protected, and that common value has something to do with humanity. I want to be locked down because I want to protect my neighbors, not just me alone. It's about the whole neighborhood, the whole nationhood, and in fact, the whole global sort of village, as it were. Yeah. So we talked about the enemies, the invisible enemies out there, external to us, and therefore we stay home. Makes good, perfect logic. Huh? If the enemies are out there, then let's stay home. And this is where I think the question of mental strength becomes important. Staying home sounds easy. You can never stay home, for longer than myself, maybe 2 days. After that, I need to walk somewhere. So alhamdulillah, this campus allows me to do that. Otherwise, I've got into mental health a long time ago. Right? So I want to make these differences because at the end of the day, the visible enemy out there, there are plenty of them, right? They can say whatever they want to say, but for the visible enemy, it's easy. You say so much, I'll just shut it up. That's it. There are many things that you can do because you know who the enemies were or who the enemies are, and you can work something. Yeah? SOP lah, itulah ini, you can give whatever you think. You can control them because you see them. You run into problem when you don't see them, right? At the moment, we are trying to play a game called vaccine. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but that is something that we need to try and make sure what works. And this is part of the experimentation, the scientific endeavors that we are trying to do. Alhamdulillah, in a larger measure, it seems to work, but it is not a total solution when we talk about the Delta variants and so on and so forth, right? So the invisible enemy, I think, is our problem, but there's more problem to this when we talk about the other invisible enemies within. Just now we talked about the invisible enemies outside, so we can stay home. What about now the enemies is within you, you stay home, the enemies will stay with you. What do you do with this? All right? And who are these invisible enemies? I like to quote Imam Al-Ghazali. I think this is finally the problem that we are facing today. Yeah? In one of his quotations, he said, declare your jihad, your struggle, on the 12 enemies that you cannot see, right? And these are the 12. Egoism, arrogance, conceit, selfishness, greed, lust, intolerance, anger, lying, cheating, gossiping, membawang, and slandering. Or is it slandering, membawang? I'm not too sure. Yeah. Now, I think all of us have got these dozen invisible enemies. One may be bigger than the other, but the bapa of the enemies is ego, egocentrism. All right? Now, Al-Ghazali said, until and unless you can control, dia kata, if you can master and destroy them, then we'll be ready to fight the enemy that you can see. All right. Now, the point is that the enemy within you is undermining you, and therefore the enemy that you can see have a upper hand as far as that. I think I want to bring this into focus. Well, COVID-19 is important, but the COVID-19 will win the game until and unless we are able to control these 12 invisible enemies within us. It is so difficult, let's just control the first one, the bapa, which is ego. Once you control egocentric, the rest I think can be reduced to a level that perhaps it is manageable. So this is what the university is trying to do when we talk about virtues, when we talk about working together. You cannot work together if you are selfish. You cannot work together if there's greed. You cannot work together if you start lying with one another. You cannot work together if you're arrogant. These are all the enemy that's working within that makes things so difficult. And I think we need to be humble enough to admit that we are part and parcel of this problem. And how do you manage this is something that we are now talking about when we talk about how do you go together and work this together as a kind of a community within this university. Yeah. So to defeat these invisible enemies, what is recommended is basically to start working on values. All right. And you need now to start to vaccinate yourself with values, not vaccines. Yeah. So every morning, make sure before we wake up, we vaccinate ourselves with a set of values that I want to go to work, but these are the set of values that I want to promote in my workplace. Right? And before you go to bed, maybe you also want to find out whether this vaccination works for the day. If it doesn't work for the day, what else can you do? Right? And you want also to use the soft power to infuse some of these values to your enterprise, to the education, to the culture, to the diplomacy, and to the policies that we create. Unless and until we do this on a regular basis, just as we have done it for the COVID-19, this invisible enemy within ourselves, this one you have no choice because the enemy is within you. Yeah, you need to actually work on it. If the coronavirus is within you, you do all sorts of things. Yeah? We stay in the hospital, we take ventilators and so on and so forth. Now we know for sure this 12, at least one or two, is still lingering in us, and how do you work around it? And I think that is the message that I want to deliver to you. Yeah. So this is the one of the quotation that is beautiful, I thought. Nowadays, people know the price of everything. Yeah, you tell them, oh, I know what's the price for this, but the value of nothing. There's another quotation by, I think, another philosopher that talks about, don't teach your children about richness because then they know the value of things. Teach them about happiness, then they know about the values of things, not the price of things. Yeah. So again, how do you approach education? How do you approach way of life, as it were? What is important to us so that the values remain intact? And for this university, I think the values are quite clear. I don't have to mention about this. Each time we talk about, we mention about this khair, fast, and safia. These are the values that we want to contain and make it part and parcel of the culture system within our universities, so that at the end of the day, it will bring peace, not only to ourselves, but to the people around us, and hopefully, inshallah, to the global environment of rahmatan lil alamin. All right, let me finish off with a few, 4 other slides here. We know now this environment will stay, all right? And we also know now this is the issue that we're going to face. I'm sorry, this is not meant for the ladies. This is the only graphic I can find apa dah ni. If I wish I could have trim rambut dia, tapi susah nak buat. But the human being, and we're burning in our head. Burning in our head, maknanya, our mental state is never steady, given all sorts of things happening around us. Yeah, particularly in my office, there's always news that comes in and out. And sometimes these news are very disturbing. It only not only disturbs your mind, it also disturbs your heart. it disturbs your emotion. And that's why I'm trying to put that the black heart ni maknanya it's a troubled heart lah. You don't get that peace that you want. We talk about sejahtera, but sometimes it is not that, right? And you want to break away. I just want to also share with you, maybe if you have this kind of aggressive look, sometimes you don't want him, he wants to kill you that day. I don't know why. Why? Because internally they are not settled, particularly when you see our students. And if you look at your face, to have this kind of features, you need to work on your at least 43 muscles, I was told. Right from the forehead down to your chin. All these muscles need to work together to have that look, which is not a pretty look. But yet we work so hard to make sure that the muscle gives this look. As compared to this look, smiling, it takes only 10 muscles to work on it. So given a choice, I would work on the 10 muscles and look pretty rather than 48 muscles and look still very, very ugly, right? And when you have this pretty face, suddenly your darkened heart becomes a little bit lighter because it works on your emotion at the same time. So I'm trying to suggest, why don't all of us try to be a little bit more friendly? Make sure you smile, give good intentions and so on and so forth. If your intentions are good, then your heart becomes even brighter. Ada bunyi lagi. So there is a simple solution for me, and that's why we come to my office, we laugh all the time. Sometimes we don't know why we laugh, but we need to laugh so that it excites us, it makes us feel lighter, it makes us feel that work can be managed, that you have to quarrel about it. But some of you and some of us, I think, things that we can hide our face by having a smile, and that smile sometimes it's not an original smile, but you can still hide it because we've got now this mask to do it. So ambil gambar pun whether you senyum atau tidak, nobody cares as long as you look smart. But don't forget, nowadays with this mask on, the eyes becomes, people say you smile with your eyes. Because the eyes is also the window to your heart. Dari mata turun ke hati kind of thing. All right. So you cannot run away from this. And that's why I want to suggest, if we can live in an environment that everybody sort of, appreciate each other. We know we have got problems, but let's not exaggerate the problem and let's not make it worse. And hopefully this will then become the real you. I think it's a matter of habit that you actually construct yourself, and kesudahannya you can have a new personality, It's a new hairstyle, and that is you smiling all the time. And if you then give these values all the time, you probably can get away with many of the things that we are now confronting today, particularly all these other distractions around us. And this distraction is the one that I think we would like to get away from. So we are trying to now build another component of a leadership. How do you run away from this distraction? Once we build this, we'll share with you so that you remain in control, that your environment do not control you, but you control yourself. The environment leaves as it is. Like the wind just now, you are not able to direct the wind, but you need to play along with where the direction is going so that you can get the best of impact as far as the direction is concerned, arriving at your destiny. And for this, I think we need to thank a group of people who are almost selfless. Agaknya of the 12 yang ada tu, these are only the group of people yang agaknya very selfless. They give wholeheartedly what they needs to be given. We've seen this in Kuantan, hundreds of them working every day until now, maybe until October or November. And we've got our own group of people here who have run the PPEV, and then they will do this again on the 7th and the 8th for the second dose. And there are many more as we go out and get this group of people working. And I hope we can join the frontliners. We don't have to be, quote unquote, be there all the time, but when we are needed, I think we will be there. to help and to give whatever that needs to be given. Yeah. So I only wish that we can create a community of this nature, that our heart becomes very vibrant, that our heart becomes very sincere and very positive, that it will shine through our face, it will shine through our eyes, and it will shine through the community that we've got. I think this is the only way to arrive at quote unquote the independence that we want, that we do not depend or that we do not be subjected to the external environment that we are subjected to, yet we can remain independent of that individual that knows his role, it knows his position, and it knows its responsibility in trying to bring the best there is within the community and within itself. Yeah. So I will stop there. Thank you very much, and I wish you well. And on that note, I pronounce the declaration for the month of August as the Bulan Merdeka for this year. So wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you, Country Rector, for the important reminders. Throughout the month of August until 16th September 2021, many activities have been lined up to commemorate the Merdeka Day. These are some of the activities prepared by the different campuses. Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite everyone to sing the IIUM song.
Let's lead the way, lighten the future, share the wisdom to the spirit of Islam. Revelation and reason shall excel, shall prevail. Merging faith and knowledge, we the Khalifa, we will fulfill the amanah. Together, we make the world a better place. Forever, expand the culture of Iqra. IIUM is to realize the meaning of Ramadan lil Alamin. Together, we make the world a better place. Forever, expand the culture of Iqra. IIUM is to realize the meaning of mercy to all worlds, for all mankind.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Alhamdulillah, we are now approaching the end of our program this afternoon. I would like to invite Ustaz Muhammad Ramadan Subki Abdullah, Religious Officer from the Office of Sultan Haji Ahmad Shah Mosque, to recite the dua.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ridhaka wal jannah wa na'udzu bika min sakhatika wan nar. اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا وعن والدينا وعن جميع المسلمين والمسلمات برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
Amin.
O Allah, we beg thee all of good things which pertain to this day and days hereafter. You have bestowed on us the greatness of your ni'mah in which we could never imagine, and you have protected us from harm when we cannot detach ourselves from it. We have done deeds in which only you have the knowledge of its good or its bad. O Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, bless all of us today in this program. Make it a stage for further prosperity and progress, and be of great benefit and contribution to the development of our people in Malaysia and the whole of the Ummah. O Allah, we plead that you shower tawfiq upon us for us to continue to do good deeds that receive your pleasure and a harmonious life that you bless. O Allah, we seek your might to safeguard our physical self so that we continue to worship you. Safekeep us so that our hearts are filled with love. Please open our hearts so that we seek you always, just like how you open the hearts of those who are righteous. Please place us among those who keep to their promises and able to fulfill our responsibilities. Please make our life a witness to all deeds that you have enjoined us to do, O Allah, the most gracious, the most giving. Allahumma ja'al jam'ana hadha jam'an marhuma wa tafarruqana min ba'dihi tafarruqan ma'suma. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adhaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wassalamun ala al-mursalin. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Taqabbalallahu minkum.
Amin. Taqabbalallahu ya karim.
Amin ya Rabbal Alamin. Shukran jazilan Ustaz Ramadan. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before we end, I would like to thank Honorable Tan Sri Rector, the University Management Committee members, and all IIUM staff for your presence, be it physically as well as virtually. So stay safe, everyone. Wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Masya Allah. Last year, how did we do this?
Last year. I don't think so.